how we're keeping, Don?
All right, very well, thanks. You know, we're surviving like everybody else, huh?
Crazy, just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Nuts. I saw a release today, Don. Did you see that interview with Bob Arum had done? Did you see it?
No, I haven't seen it. What did he have to say?
He says he's going to start boxing again in June or July.
Uh-huh.
In studios with no crowds.
Oh, okay. Well, that's going to be interesting. You know, it's all right if you have enough TV money to pay the fighters. If you don't, you're in a problem. You know, it's like we have here with baseball. They want open baseball, but the players don't want to take a cut. And the owners say 50% of their revenue comes from the stadiums, the concessions, the parking. So that's a big difference, you know. That's something very difficult to overcome.
Don't you think, though, Don, it's a big problem? Me and Anthony were talking about this last week. It sounds really simplistic, doesn't it, to say, well, we'll put everybody in one hotel and keep everyone together. But, you know, when you think of how many people that includes with hotel staff and everybody, it's...
Of course. It's peripheral. That's right. At the hotel, then somebody else goes out for a walk. They go get something to eat. You know, you go into the arenas, they're going to have people staffing it. You're going to have the commission. So it gets to a wider and wider group of people. It's going to be hard. What do we do when we try to do big shows to get people to come back? Say, I want to sit next to 10,000 people I don't know. You know.
I don't know. I think that's a long way off, don't you, Anne?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, like Don was just saying then as well, if you've got to remember, just say, for instance, they put a card of 6 decent fights on. Straight away, you've got the 12 fighters, but then you've got 4 or 5 minimum per team.
Yeah.
So straight away, before you know it, there's a few hundred people involved in the studio.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's,
right.
Do you know what I think? It's so hard to get your head around.
Do you know, I think two things as well that are really important that people aren't picking up on in this is, one, what does it look like politically I don't know what situations like in States, Don, but in Britain, there's not enough testing kits to even test the front staff and doctors.
Yeah.
What does it look like? Professional sport takes out 1,000 testing kits so they can a sporting event when there's not enough tests for the actual doctors and nurses. That's not a great look.
No, absolutely.
If they end up doing a show and somebody catches it through one of these shows and ends up passing, they're going to be getting sued for hundreds of millions, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And everybody's going to be part of the lawsuit. The boxing commission is going to be liable. The boxing promoter is going to be liable. The arena is going to be liable. We really should wait, till we get the testing. Look, that's what they do with the HIV/AIDS. It's a transmissible disease, so every boxer has to take the hepatitis B and C and the AIDS test. Got to wait, but the problem with this is it's transmissible by, just coughing or sneezing. So there's a big difference. So the crowd is also as much a possible carrier or susceptible to it. So it's a real big difference. So you're not just testing the participants; it's everybody who, like you say, will be at the venue. That's going to disrupt. The testing is the key. I mean, that's going to find you negative. But what do you test the crowd? If you're negative, you can come in. If you're positive, you can't. I mean, what do you wear, a badge around your head? I don't know. It's very strange, very unprecedented, isn't it?
Yeah, I just think it sounds simple to do, doesn't it? Let's just do it in a closed studio. But I just think, like me and Anthony ran about it last week or so with football, weren't we? But when you think of how many people, Don.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? 40,000, 50,000?
It's just, it's a lot more tricky than it sounds, isn't it, to do?
Yeah. There's always going to be obstacles in the way, isn't there? Saying then there's people, and like you said, if someone then picks up it and then it spreads, picks up the virus, I just personally can't see. We'll see because we've seen it with over. I keep saying it with the WWE.
Yeah, they get away with it.
I just don't see how it's going to start until this virus is under control.
Did you think, Don, do you know when the UFC were going to do that we're going to book an island and do it all on an island?
Yeah.
And then that got pulled. Do you think that were more Disney pulling it than the UFC?
I think so. Like you say, these big corporations, can you imagine be a public corporation and people die, they they contact the coronavirus, the lawsuits will be into the hundreds of millions. And for a moral situation, how do you want to expose people? Again, gradually get back to they say here when the rate of people getting, sent into hospitals or testing positive starts to drop, when the death rate starts to drop, then we know that it's starting to decline a bit, and then there'll be more tests or things like that. I mean, we've all been lucky. The group of us sitting here on the show, and nobody's gotten it yet, thank God. We don't, but you don't know. I might have it. How do I know? You know, unless I get really ill. Every time you get a cold, you start to say, "Oh my God, I've got coronavirus."
Yeah, you start panicking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know how to introduce you on this show. Is it legendary matchmaker?
No. Well, drop the legendary. Just say boxing matchmaker and agent who quite old. Aging
historian, which is it?
Agent, yeah.
Which do we go with? All of the above.
All of the above, yes. Old, over the hill, boxing agent, yeah.
No. So, Don, tell us how you got started in the sport. Tell us what made you, why did you fall in love with boxing? When did you start, and when did you decide it was something that you physically wanted to do with your life?
Good God, I still haven't decided, but it's funny because I had no interest in sports as a kid. I wanted to be a zoologist. That was my only abiding love. And sports, I wasn't a player of baseball or football or boxing. No one in my family watched boxing on television. My father had predeceased me. My mother, I was born in October. My dad died in September. I was an only child. So I was raised by my mother and my maternal grandmother. My grandfather had no interest at all in sports. We didn't watch boxing on TV. And somehow, because of all the publicity with the then Cassius Clay Sonny Liston fight in 1964, I remember getting some interest there. I remember listening to that bout on a clock radio that my mother had in her bedroom. And that's the first fight I ever heard. And then they had a special on TV about Joe Louis. Remember watching that? And then in 1966, the Ali Cooper fight. It was on Telstar Satellite. It was the first home televised heavyweight title fight in about 10 years. Because all the other bouts before that, Patterson, Liston, Patterson, Johansson, were all closed circuit TV. You had to go to a theater to see them. And I was quite young. So just coincidentally, that was on in the afternoon. And that night they had a boxing match at Shea Stadium, the baseball park, former ballpark here in New York where the Mets played. And Jose Torres fought Wayne Thornton. And I insisted my mother take me to see the fight. And we went, and there was nobody in the place, about 4,000 people in a 50,000 seat stadium. Had I known then what I know now, I would have said, what kind of business is this that draws 4,000 people in a 50,000 seat stadium? That's been the story of my life. Then I got involved buying boxing magazines, watching fights on TV. I saw the Ali Foreman fight, Ali against Zora Foley in Madison Square Garden, the old garden in March of 67. I was going to regular bouts, and I met a few guys, a guy named Malcolm Flash Gordon, who used to print a program that he would write, and he printed in his apartment on an offset machine, and they would sell it at Madison Square Garden. And there was Johnny Bosdahl, who later became Johnny Boz, and a guy, Jack Obermeyer, and then Bruce Trampler, the current matchmaker and vice president at Top Rank, was writing articles from college. He went to Ohio State University. So between the four of us, we together, we'd sell the program for 35 cents. You sell 200 or 300. You'd have enough left to buy a ticket. In those days, tickets were not that expensive, and go to the fights. And I started meeting promoters from there and did local publicity, started making fights, went to work for Don King, then went to work for Butch Lewis. Then from there on in, I've just been in this in my entire life, which I had never anticipated, but here I am. I wrote for Boxing Illustrated starting in 1970, was South American correspondent for 5 years. So they got me to meet people.
Weren't that program that you used to write and sell at Madison Square Garden, wasn't that the one that used to expose the ratings about a guy who died getting back in ratings and stuff like that? Weren't that one, Don?
Yeah, they blew the lid off of this. This is after I had left, but he blew the lid off this tournament that the Ring magazine ran, U.S. tournament, and they found out guys like Marvin Hagler and Eddie Mustafa and Marvin Johnson were being excluded for guys from in Maine who never thought anybody could stand up or walk across the ring because a couple of managers were getting kickbacks from anybody to put you in the tournament. So they blew that out, and that's really what began where people so emphasize win and loss records. Now you don't ask how good is the fighter. He's 22-0 or 25-1 before they say, well, he fought this guy and that guy and this guy. It's become a statistical business, but that really started the emphasis on bona fide records and what exactly a fighter did rather than just make it up as you go along.
So, Don, obviously you're in New York, which is like an historical centre of boxing. Talk to us about your relationship with Madison Square Garden.
Well, that's the place we used to go. As I say, the first bout I ever saw in Madison Square Garden. It's interesting because it came at a transitional period. There were 4 Madison Square Gardens. They started in 26th Street, Madison Avenue. There's a park there called Madison Square, and that's why they named it Madison Square Garden. That was in the 19th century. And the idea of a garden, like a casino in those days, a casino was so much where you gambled or a garden was a place where you had a beer garden, more or less, or you go outdoors and it'd be a hot time and you congregate there. So not so much as a garden that you go flowers and plants at. So the first place was named Madison Square Garden because it was actually in Madison Square. They moved up to 49th Street, which became probably the most famous one affiliated with boxing, where they started televised boxing. That was in 1925, and they ran fights every Friday night. And I saw the last bout in that garden on 49th Street and 8th Avenue was Benny Briscoe and Luis Rodriguez. Luis Rodriguez toyed with him, won 9 rounds out of 10. And then the first bout in the new garden, the first show in the new garden, was Joe Frazier against Buster Mathis and Nino Benvenuti against the third Nino Benvenuti Emil Griffith fight. So that fight I went to new garden. So it's definitely the beginning, the last one, the last fight and the last one, and the first one in this current garden incarnation.
Wow.
And saw probably 100 main events in between, or a couple of hundred, yeah.
Do you know what, Don? How do you feel? I know we're not sort of fast forwarding too much, but a lot of the fights, a lot of the big fights now are going to the Barclays Centre.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? How do you feel about? I mean, the Barclays Centre is a great arena, but obviously it's not the history, sort of the mecca of boxing, being Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Do you know what the reason for that is? Exactly, I mean, like there's rapes and stuff like that, but.
Well, I believe, I almost had, when the Barclays Center first opened through Al Haymon, I asked them to see if I could get a job there doing boxing. I thought, see, Madison Square Garden Corporation for many years ran their own promotions. They didn't rent the building. They had their own shows. And they stopped that about 20 years ago. And said, hey, this would be great. Do your own promotions. Well, they had made a deal with Golden Boy to be their promoter. And after that, then PBC with Al Haymon took over. So I think because they made a good deal with him, he's been willing to, run a lot of shows there. But I think, well, look, Madison Square Garden, the large building, it's a $400,000 rental fee. I think Barclays about $300,000. So some of it has to do with the cost of renting it. But the Barclays has been, open. They probably have more dates to fill. The garden is booked more often. Of course. The cost of running the garden's more expensive. But I'll tell you, for New York, it's been a wonderful thing because it's the first time in memory that we've had 2 major indoor arenas. Madison Square Garden did everything in their power for their entire history to block any other large arena from opening up in New York City. And we were quite unique in that. In fact, they spent so many millions of dollars to stop a football stadium from being built on the west side of Manhattan that had a roof on it. They didn't quite care if you had to build a stadium without a roof. But once you put that roof on it, you were competition. Yeah. But now I think for boxing fans, it's phenomenal because we still have fights in the garden. And now Barclays come up. So it's turned out to be great. I think it's a wonderful turn of events.
So, Don, one fight me and Anthony wanted to talk to you about, and you were telling me the other day you were actually in attendance, even though you paid too much for your ticket. 1971, Ali against Frazier.
Yeah, March 8th, 71. Look, it was probably the most memorable event in my lifetime. It was a great, I don't know if it's the greatest fight I've ever seen, but it's pretty close. It could be, but it certainly was the greatest event I ever went to. You have to go with the genesis of it. Ali wins the title in 1964. That year, Joe Frazier wins the Olympic gold medal. So this has been a competition that's been building up, for 6-7 years. And then Ali becomes the heavyweight champ. He loses the title because he doesn't go into the draft. They withdraw recognition, but he's fighting legally to get back. In the meantime, Frazier starts to come up. As Ali is out, Frazier takes that period of time to really establish himself. The first big fight that made him was stopping George Chuvalo, this guy, from this Canadian heavyweight who had never been knocked off his feet, and till that time had never been stopped. And Frazier stopped him in July of 1967 in the Garden, and he was on to fight for the New York State version of the heavyweight title. In those days, you could have a state declare a guy champ. And he boxed Buster Mathis, who had beaten him twice in the Olympic trials, but broke his thumb, and Frazier took his place as an alternate. So it was kind of a revenge fight, and they were both undefeated. Frazier stopped them. The WBA, meanwhile, had a tournament to fill Ali's title with 8 heavyweights. Among them was Ernie Terrell, was defeated by Thad Spencer. Jimmy Ellis stopped Leotis Martin. The second round, Oscar Bonavena beat Carl Mildenberger, and Jerry Quarry defeated Floyd Patterson. Then they moved to the next round, and Quarry beat Spencer. Ellis beat Bonavena, and then Ellis beat Quarry. And then he beat Patterson on a controversial decision, and they fought in February of 70, so Frazier united the titles. At that point, Ali gets his license back and fights Jerry Quarry in October in Atlanta and stops him. Frazier knocks out Bob Foster, the light heavyweight champ, in November. Ali beats Oscar Bonavena, stops him in December 7th in Madison Square Garden, and it just set the stage for this March 8th fight. And it was so I'm saying this is a fight that was anticipated, and the drums have been beating for 3.5 years. And they came along, made the fight because Jerry Parencio, a movie producer, went out and guaranteed them both $5 million. You got Jack Kent Cooke, who was the owner of the in LA and owned the LA Kings and the Washington Redskins, to put up the guarantee. Madison Square Garden put $500,000 into the pot. They hosted the live gate and shared in some of the revenue. And it was just one of these unbelievable scenarios. And when you look at this situation, Ali comes back in October. Frazier fights in November. Ali fights in December. And in 90 days, they make the fight. And we know how long they've been talking about doing, Wilder and Joshua. Hasn't even, they've lost. They haven't done it. And they did it so quickly. The intention was for Ali to fight Frazier in June in Yankee Stadium, the big baseball park here. But Ali still had an appeal pending against with the Supreme Court for his draft evasion. He had been convicted. He was on appeal. And everybody felt he could lose that appeal and he never would get out. He'd have to go to jail for 5 years. So they rushed the fight 90 days. Shows how phenomenal, how fighters were in those days. They wanted to fight. Yeah. So, it was just one of those incredible. It was like, those evenings where every celebrity in the world, Frank Sinatra was there. He was taking photographs for Life magazine, William Saroyan, Norman Mailer, everybody you can imagine. I'll tell you, I recall Johnny Addy was a famous announcer in New York. And they introduced, at that time we had a tradition, all the old champs. So bring him up here, former middleweight champ, Rocky Graziano. Here's the Man of Steel, Tony Zale, Will of the Wisp, Willie Pep, on and on. 5-time champ, Emil Griffith. And then he goes, here, we have more for you. He says, here he is, the Manasseh Mauler, Jack Dempsey. Place goes crazy. And he says, the Brown Bomber, 25 title defenses. Joe Lou, they go insane. Here's one more, the hometown boy, 5-time middleweight champ, undefeated welterweight. Sugar Ray, they couldn't finish Sugar Ray Robinson. It blew up like a bomb. So then Johnny Addy says, on occasion we introduce celebrities. He said, but everybody's here tonight. And he walks over and he shakes. He says, hiya, Frank. Shakes Sinatra's hand, says, let's go. 15 rounds for the undefeated, undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. It could have hurt a pin drop. Unbelievable night. Phenomenal. And the fight lived up to it.
Were you in a panic on trying to get a ticket, or were you confident you'd get one?
Well, there was an old bookmaker. His name was English. He was born in England, and I couldn't get a ticket. Everybody, a million people wanted the ticket. And he said, I'll get your ticket. There was a guy named Billy Brown. His brother was the maker for Jim Norris years back. But he ran a ticket agency. From Mike Jacobs had a ticket agency when he started. So they inherited it at the Abbey Victoria, the Shabby Abbey, they call it, the Abbey Victoria Hotel. So the cheapest ticket was $25. He says, I'll give it to you. It's $35. Oh, my God, $35. I had to rob the piggy bank and get my communion money and said, all right, here's the $35. But I wouldn't have sold it for $1 million if I had a chance to, it was a great, great night. Phenomenal. Unforgettable night, I would have to say that.
Wow. I'm going to it on who were your money on, who were you picking?
I was a Frazier fan then. I was rooting for. He was a slight favorite, 6-5, and he came through. That 15-round knockout was just, unbelievable. And it was a great. Every moment it was. Ali to me won the first round because Frazier was a very slow starter. It's like a motorboat. You have to pull it 2 or 3 times till the motor turns over, right? So he lost the first. Third round he hits his stride, and there was one point where he hurt Ali, and Ali went back, but he fooled his way out of that. And there's another point where Frazier, if you look at the film today, he drops his hands and just lets Ali tee off on him. Like, you have nothing. He paid for that in the long run. And, of course, the 15th round, the famous knockout with Ali with he had red trunks on and the white tassels on his shoes up in the air. And it was just a truly phenomenal night. Really, really amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Well, yep. One of the biggest events in boxing history, without a doubt. One of the biggest fights in boxing history, without a doubt. I was saying just the last time we was on here, a lot of people seem to remember the Thriller in Manila, but for the scale of how big of an event that was, nothing comes close to that first fight with them, does it?
No, and I'll tell you an interesting thing. The tradition in those days would give the fighters a reasonable guarantee against a percentage of the gross. Yeah. And Teddy, the matchmaker at the Madison Square Garden, always told the story, said, we offered them $1 million guarantee each against 30% of the gross. Yeah. But when Parencio came, this unprecedented $2.5 million. Remember, this is 1971. It's like $100 million today. They saw that money. They signed right away. And Brennan would always tell people, the fight grossed $20 million. Had they taken my deal, they'd gotten $6 million apiece. And with that in mind, that's why they could never make the rematch. The fighters wanted so much money for the rematch, even with $2.5 million, they got underpaid. So they held off, and they didn't fight again until Ali had lost to Norton and Frazier had been knocked out by Foreman. At that point, they did the rematch. That also was in the Garden, 12 rounds. Ali won that. That was in 74, and Ali went on to beat Foreman. And then, of course, the Thriller Manila, October of 75. But as an event, you had two undefeated heavyweight champions, two gold medalists, two guys had beaten everyone. It was like that old Western where they're down there, they're going to draw on each other, and there's nobody left. Everybody else has left town, and they're standing on the sidelines, and these two great gunslingers, I don't know, Billy the Kid and Wild Bill Hickok, and that's all. You shot everybody else, and that was just them. It was phenomenal. You don't have that today, yeah.
It's one of the, it's like you just said, and it's not only probably one of the most iconic nights in boxing, but probably in world sport. It's got to be in the top 3 or 4. You don't think it's going top 3 to 5 sporting events ever, wouldn't you? The first.
Yeah. And look, I'm talking clearly.
When you were walking out after, were you walking on air? Could you believe what you'd seen? Or
it was unbelievable. And then we went out where there's a place called Bickford's. It was like a coffee shop, and they had like pies and cakes. And we'd all go there. I'll stay at 3 o'clock because the adrenaline was so pumped up, and you were excited. And we had a little bet going because the New York Times was traditionally, it's like the Guardian. They're not a big boxing paper, a very liberal paper, and And I said, let's make a bet that'll be on the front page of the New York Times. Well, the next day's paper would come out at like 11 o'clock. You could get the New York Times for the next day. They print it at that time. And we waited, and there it was, front page of the New York Times. I mean, it had been, before the fight, Time Magazine, I remember, ran, the front cover was the $5 million fighters with Ali and Frazier on each side. And Life Magazine was the front cover the next. This is some phenomenal stuff for a sporting event, for a boxing match. Incredible. It really, they captivated the imagination of the world. It was really a phenomenal night, yeah.
So how old were you then, Don? What were you, 19, 18?
I was going on 19. I was 18. Yeah, March 8th, I would be 19 in October, so I was just 18 years of age, yeah. Still in high school. No, I just finished high school, just graduated high school. I was going to college at night. And, of course, I took off college that night. And it was a Monday night. We used to run the big fights on Monday because you have the Sunday news. The Sunday newspapers had the biggest circulation. So to get the biggest story, you'd have a Sunday story. And then we had afternoon papers, as you still do in England. So they would do the weigh-in the same day. It wasn't the day before. So the weigh-in would be 11, and then the afternoon paper would carry the fighters, on maybe the front, usually the back page, but that was the front page. So all of it happens. It was so condensed at that time. Dan McAlinden, the British fighter, I remember he fought on the card against Hassan Rahman. That was Muhammad Ali's brother, and he won. Yes.
Was that like one of those moments when you feel, when you've been and attended that, and at that age where you thought, I want to be a part of this, I want to work in this industry, this is what I want to do?
Yes, it was that McAlinden-Rahman fight that made up my mind for me.
Not that one.
No, but yeah, that was something that you couldn't, you breathe it in. You couldn't, it was amazing. I remember worming my way down to the seat. I was up in these cheap seats, but you knew how to finagle in those days. So I got sitting, I sat on the steps, and in front of me was Aretha Franklin. And she wasn't as big as she became. And she had on this big conical-shaped hat, like, I don't know, looked like a fool's cap, for whatever reason. And there was a guy sitting behind her who had paid for that seat. He said, take off that hat. Take off that. And she's not listening to him. And the guy turns and he says, don't you understand that's Aretha Franklin? He says, I don't care who the hell she is. I paid $100 for this ticket. She better take off that damn hat. She didn't take off the hat. The guy went like this and like that. He saw the fight. But, yeah, she wouldn't take off that hat. So, I mean, and she wasn't at ringside. She was upstairs. So that's the kind of pecking order they had at that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, just to give some context to it, Don, so a $35 ticket in 1971, what would that be today, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, the cheapest seat they had for the fight between Mayweather and Pacquiao was $2,500. So if you think about that, 10 times as much, so maybe $3,500 for that seat. The ringside tickets were $150. Amazing. I'm sure they sold the scalpers for $500. But could you imagine Ali Frazier, $150? And they were debating, 250 is too much, 100 is too little. We'll make it 150. They based it on the Lewis Kahn fight, which they charged $100. And now these guys were old school, Teddy Brenner, Harry Markson, they've been around forever. So I don't know, when they charged $100 for it, didn't say a lot of the ringside seats didn't sell for that Kahn Lewis fight. So I don't know, we better keep it reasonable, 150, but no more. Scalpers had a holiday. I mean, they cleaned up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So So then you saw that when you were 18, Don. When did you start to get more directly involved after that?
Well, then I was writing for that program. Well, I had already been working, as a matter of fact, for Boxing Illustrated. I'll give you my epiphany moment. When I was working with Flash Gordon, it was free. You could write anything you want, so it was great. And then, as they said, you print it, we'd sell it, we get 15 cents. So I was on a vacation to California. And I said, look, I'm going to California. Can you write a letter to this promoter, George Parnassus? This is a guy I idolized from afar. He was a manager of Seferino Garcia and Enrique Bolaños and the matchmaker at the Olympic Auditorium. He retired and he came back. The Forum was a new arena that opened about 1967, 68. We had 3 or 4 major new arenas that opened in the United States because hockey expanded and they were expanding the basketball franchises. So there was one, the Spectrum in Philly, the new Madison Square Garden, the Forum in LA. And so the Forum hired Parnassus, and his old rival, Eileen Eaton, whom he worked for years back as the matchmaker, was running weekly at the Olympic Auditorium. So Parnassus opens this up, and he's running these great fights. He starts off with Chu Castillo and Jesus Pimentel, and they do 18,000 people. And then he brings in Lionel Rose to fight Castillo. He's got Jose Napoles there, all these fighters I'd never seen, and you're reading about them, phenomenal fighters. So there's a fight in August of 69 between Ruben Oliveros, who was like 67-0 with 65 knockouts, and Lionel Rose, this Aboriginal world champion. He had fought in California twice, so he established himself as a popular fighter. And Oliveros was the great new Mexican attraction, probably the biggest in the context of all time. So they're fighting. So I said, write a letter. So the guy writes, my correspondent, Don Majeski. This is 69, so I'm 16. And I looked about 12. So I walk in, he had an office at 607 South Parkview in the Elks Building in Los Angeles. And at that time, Parnassus was in his 70s. He had come back. He had been around since the 20s, And he's there, thick glasses, thick Greek accent. And he says, yes, can I help you? I said, well, I'd like to this is another, sold out, nobody can get a ticket. Yes, I'm here from the Tonight's boxing program. I saw a program that was, on an offset machine, mimeograph, stapled together. And he looks at it and he says, you're the correspondent? I said, yes, can I get all right, here. So I get a pass and I go to the fight. I'm upstairs, I'm moving down a little bit, and it was really nice seat. So I sit there, and I think he had Dwight Hawkins, Alfredo Marcano, and he had Oliveros and Rose. Oliveros knocks him out, 18,000, people going nuts. So I come back, and the program was 28 pages. So unfortunately, Rocky Marciano dies in a plane crash that week. So the front is devoted to Marciano, obviously. But there's a bar above that. And right from California, ringside, our correspondent, Oliveros Rose. So he gives me 22 pages to write about this fight. So I'm writing, this is the greatest event in the history of mankind since the creation. This is the George Parnassus, the greatest human being who has ever lived. He's bigger than Moses. He's bigger than Buddha. He's bigger than Washington. The greatest show, every word. I'm pulling out the thesaurus, every fantastic, unbelievable, incredible, phenomenal, every word I could throw in there. And this guy, of course, there's no editing, so you can write whatever you want. So I send a copy out to George Parnassus. Now, as it turns out, 4 months later, my idol as a fighter at that time was Jose Napoles, who's the welterweight champ of the world. And I had followed his career in the Ring magazine. I never saw him fight. One time on the Spanish language TV in a gritty film, but which he was winning. He's beating L.C. Morgan. He's beating Lennox Beckles. He's beating Eddie Pace. He's knocking out Urbina. He's beating everybody. Can't get a title fight. Parnassus finally puts up 80,000 to get him a title fight against Curtis Coates. So he beats Griffith, and now he's going to fight against Ernie Red Lopez for the title, #1 contender. So I'm back in California. I said, write another letter. I'll go out and give me a seat upstairs. It'll be great. I go out there, and I said, I come in, I see this Parnassus again. He's busy counting tickets or whatever. Oh, yes, what? Hugh, what do you want? I said, oh, yeah, all right. So he throws this pass across the desk, and in the corner of my eye, I see the program, the story I wrote about him, extolling him as the greatest human being since Adam. And it's over there. So, you read my column. So now I go to the fight. And now the Forum in LA is a place where it starts at the top and you work your way down. Sort of built in a little, like a hole, like an amphitheater in a hole. So I come inside, I show the pass to the usher. He says, oh, you're not here, the next level down. So, oh, okay, that's even better than the balcony, right? Next to the balcony. Here's the thing. No, you're the next level down. Oh, this is as good as last time. Great. No, you're the next level down. I keep going down. I said, where's this seat now? So even better. This is fantastic. So I said, where's this? He said, no, you're the next level. Now I'm getting almost at the ringside, right above the ring where you. I said, this is great. I said, no. You're on the floor. On the floor. Oh my God, this is heaven. This is great. So now I go on the floor. I'm looking. I go like the last row. It's okay, like 40, but still it's the floor. No. You're not here. You're further up. I keep going up. I said, I'm walking around. I said, my God, this is. Where is my seat? I'm like in 10 rows back. This is the greatest. No, sir, you're not here. You're further up. I keep looking at no seat. So the fight's ready to begin. And George Parnassus, I'm looking, where's my seat? And I'm right on, the border of the ring, right on the ring. The ring is there. And then Parnassus is walking this way. I said, Mr. Parnassus, I have this thing hanging from my neck. I said, where's my seat? And he goes over to the ring. I have to show this. And he picks up a folding chair like this, and he puts it right on the ring. He says, there's your seat. And that got me in boxing for the rest of my life. I said, that's it. Yeah. So Jim Murray, who won the Pulitzer Prize, is sitting next to a guy named John Hall. John Hall was the sports editor of the LA Herald Examiner, and Murray was the #1 columnist, not only in California, but in America, a sports columnist. And I hear him say, who the fuck is this kid sitting up there? And we're back here. But that was it. And then Jose Nav's my idol, and I'm seeing him. I'm in the front seat, but I never forgot that. That was sort of the start. Then the Ali Frazier came afterwards, and then, boxing, I'll say, at that time, I don't know how you guys were, but there were very, very few young people going to boxing then. It was a big break after the mid-'60s when they stopped television on a regular basis. A lot of the arenas closed. They couldn't compete, so many other sports. But older people, very, very encouraging. George Parnassus, this Kuko Kandi. I met Nat Fleischer. There's a guy, Dan Daniel, was his editor. And Dewey Forgetta was a matchmaker. And a lot of people in Mexico. And Gil Clancy, Bert Sugar, this guy Flash, Johnny Boz. But older people really encouraged us. They wanted to see young people come in. We were no threat to them. We're not going to compete with them. But that was really a great thing. And of course, then I got friendly with Russell Peltz. But really, they just opened the doors. They were very, very happy to have people. And remember, we were just writing how great everything was. There was no criticism. That came a lot later. But at the beginning, it was just all how great and how wonderful, like Alice in Wonderland. It was a great thing. Wow. But it was great. If they didn't have that encouragement, I wouldn't be here.
Wow, that's two amazing events.
Don't you? I think it's a little bit different now in terms of they don't seem to encourage anybody coming in or coming through.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah, now they cut your throat. Well, remember, I wanted to be a writer, so I wasn't, Mickey Duff once said to me, well, it's okay while you're writing nice things about people. And I said, well, people change when I'm trying to make a match now. I said, no, now you're dealing with their money, darling. That's different. Now you're in their pocket. Before you're saying they got a great fighter, they're a great person. Nobody dislikes that. Now you're saying, I don't want to pay you $1,500. I want to pay you $1,000. Now that's costing them. I said, okay, that's the difference. But most of them are pretty. Yeah, I think it's you couldn't do what we did now because it's so far away. You used to have, as I said, regular shows in the Garden every week in Los Angeles. Chris Dundee had regular shows. Mickey, now they're not doing it. They have a television date, they run a show. It's much more hands off. Oh, I lost you.
Yeah, we've got you, pal. Can still see you.
Yeah, okay. I lost you guys, but you can see me. Okay.
Yeah, you were saying, Don, those two events, like obviously they happened so early in like your career in boxing, so it must have been hard thinking, wow, when's the next one going to come? But would you be able to tell us like sort of just one or two more like amazing nights in boxing?
Well, the great nights that I recall. Well, early, everything that happens early in your life. I was at the Ali Foreman fight in Zaire.
You was over in Zaire.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah. Well, I was working for the Boxing Illustrated, and a Mexican newspaper, Esto, asked if I would cover it because that fight was originally scheduled, and then Foreman got a cut. Cut, right? So they canceled it, and they had bought airline tickets to go from they went Mexico, New York, and they had a charter flight, New York to Zaire via Reykjavik. Somehow they got Icelandic Airlines to be the sponsor. Crazy. So you'd fly New York to Iceland to go to Zaire, but they canceled it, so they had bought the tickets, and they said, well, look, rather than send they had a photographer going, so we won't send a photographer this time. We'll use the AP wire photos. And a correspondent, why don't you take the ticket? We still have a ticket from New York to Zaire, so I switched on to Pan American Airlines, and I got to fly over there. A crazy, crazy situation, it was amazing. I remember that fight because Ali, I'll tell you the most profound thing I have, wasn't exactly Ali and Foreman, but in the fight, Ali to me won the first round, but then George Foreman in my opinion, came back and was winning the fight. People say that Ali by design had the rope-a-dope, but I think it was caught into that. I think he just had no choice because Foreman was pounding. But what you could notice with Foreman was like a balloon you deflated. He was tremendous in the second round, then a little slower in the third, then a little slower in the fourth. It was like the engine that could, but that engine was running out of steam. And finally, I think Ali exhausted him. So he knocks him out, and everybody's going insane, obviously. He comes out of the ring, and there was a fighter, Roy Williams from Philadelphia, who's going to box Henry Clark in what we call the walkout bout after the main event. So I knew Roy Williams was a guy spar with anyone. He could never get fights. He was a big, strong guy, but not a big attraction. And he saw me there, said, "Oh, Don, I'm so happy. I'm fighting. I'm going to get a chance on this great card." And they get in the ring. And as they get in the ring, there's like an explosion. And what it is, it's these clouds burst. Like it had held off the title. And the rain comes, rain that you've never seen, like you're in the middle of a waterfall.
Wow, yeah.
And they get ready to fight, and the referee looks up and he waves his arms, the fight is off. And the look on Roy Williams' eyes, oh my God, this poor, he'd been gloved up, he's in the ring, nothing go wrong now, and they call off the fight because of the rain. That was heartbreaking. But it was a great night for Ali. Amazing night there, yeah.
When you think, Don, like you were at the first Ali Frazier, then you're at like the jungle. It's like, where do you go from there, really, isn't it? Everything else must have kind of been a disappointment coming up.
That's what I'm saying, to chase those highs again would be it'd be mad.
Well, you know what happens when you get involved with fighters, like I was involved with a light heavyweight champion, Jeff Harding, then it's a different perspective. You know, when you're a pure fan, it's just a great fight. You can have your fighter that you like or who you follow, you want to win, like the home team. But as you guys know, when you get in a business now, it becomes very subjective. You only want your fighter to win. You know, it's not that was a great night, I don't care who won. So you get to change it. I mean, Jeff Harding was a guy I worked with from Australia, ended up managing him. And he was a guy, he was a tough kid, but he was never a big attraction. What had happened in Australia is Jeff Fennick started out on terrestrial TV and then switched over to pay-per-view. Whereas Harding's career began on pay-per-view, so it didn't have the crowd, the fan base. And he had one fighter booked the kid into boxing in Australia named Nestor Giovannini. And he won, but he wasn't looking the greatest. And he's going, the promoter, Bill Morty, who was another wonderful person, he said to the kid, "I don't know what to tell you. It didn't look good. Maybe you should get a job. I'll call you when I have a fight." And I called him up. I got a call from Jose Suleiman. He said, "Don, what's Jeff Harding doing?" I says, "I just fought. Why?" He said, "It's an opportunity. Donnie Lalonde just pulled out of a fight. Could he fight in 3 weeks against Dennis Andres? Call Bob Arum." Wow. I called up. I said, "Bill, what's Harding doing?" I just told him, he didn't look good his last fight. He better start thinking of another professional. I said, "Well, tell him to get back in this one because I got to fight for the light heavyweight title in 3 weeks." What? And he literally puts the phone. I said, Harding, tell me how to come back here. This is in Australia. I'm in New York. And I said, "What?" So we get everything set. The trainer doesn't want the fight. I said, "Why? He's not ready." He said, "Jesus Christ, where you get an opportunity like that?" So I'm on the phone 2.5 hours with the trainer, begging and pleading. Finally, we convinced him to do it. And at that time, there was a baseball strike. So a lot of television dates became available. So we were having like 2 fights at one casino and 2 fights at another, with boxing Saturday, Sunday, sort of like now where they're running old fights on TV because there are no live boxing matches. So everybody happened to be down in Atlantic City for something that weekend, had a big autograph show. So Ted Williams is a great baseball player. It was the last player to hit 400, which is a great average for a ball player. And then Joe DiMaggio was my dad's idol. And Pete Rose, who had the most hits, he's there at ringside. It just happened to be because there was nothing else to do. They're going to work at night, and they come to see the fight. Mike Tyson is there. And the first round, Harding goes out. Boom, they knock him down. Oh, they said, this guy was awful. What an embarrassment. I remember Eduardo Lamazon from the WBC was there. He had put him in this position in the ratings as a favor to me. And he looks, oh, Don. Gets up in third round. He's taking a hammer, and then he throws one punch. Down goes Andres. Oh, everybody's there. Next round, Andres piling and pounding. He drops Harding again about the 9th round. And it looks like Harding's going to lose. He throws one shot in the 12th round. He knocks Andres out. A fantastic night. We go to the dressing room, and Donald Trump owned the casino. And I remember he's coming in the dressing room, and he says, "Hi." He said, "Is it all right if I shake the champ's hand?" And I says, "Come on, Mr. Trump, shake his hand." And he was very happy that night. Yeah. We hadn't seen each other since, but that was a pretty amazing in terms of, objectively, subjectively being involved in the business. But he was always a great action fighter, Harding, so you never knew what was going to happen with him.
Yeah.
just crazy, Don. Some of the things you've done. What are the? Tell us a few fights, Don, from the Garden that really stand out to you, apart from obviously Ali Fraser one. What are a few that really?
Well, I remember the first time I saw Ali in person. I told you, fought Zora Foley, who was a great contender. He'd been around many years. You know, Ali they were saying he fought all the guys that Floyd Patterson wouldn't fight. You know, he boxed Liston and beat Liston twice. He beat Patterson. He boxed Ernie Rowley, Cleveland Williams, a devastating puncher. And Foley was in February of '67. It was the last fight before he had this problem with the armed services during the Vietnam War. I remember that. That was an exciting fight, 18,000 people. Jimmy Ellis knocked out Johnny Pearsall in one round of the semifinal and then went into that tournament. Nobody thought he couldn't, but he did. I remember when the next show in the Garden after the first with Fraser and Mathis was Bob Foster knocking out Dick Tiger. And there was a guy who fought the walkout bout again, Frank DePaula. Same kind of fight like Harding. Not much skill, but big heart and big punch. And he was taking a beating from this kid, Freddie Williams. They had fought twice before, once in Jersey, once in New York. This was what we call the rubber match. And he goes down and everybody sits down. He sold a lot of tickets. In the first round, he's down. Everybody gets ready to leave. He gets up, knocks the other guy down. Everybody sits down. Other guy gets up, knocks him down. Everybody gets ready to leave. He gets up and finally knocks out Freddie Williams. Now, from that fight, May of '68, he comes back and he fights a kid named Rocky Rivero, who was an old-time brawler from Argentina. Same kind of fight. He's taking a beating, knocks the guy out. He opens up what we call the Felt Forum, which is a smaller arena in the New Garden. It seats about 5,000. And he fought a guy out of Springfield, Mass. named Jimmy McDermott. They sold out the building to a $27,000 house and $8 ringside seats. And they introduced Dick Tiger, the former light heavyweight, who had lost to Tiger. And he said, he's going to fight the winner of this bout. So he goes up and he fights, he wins DePaul. They make him with Tiger in October. And it's the fight of the year. 4 knockdowns in 2 rounds. But after about the 5th round, Tiger hits a stride, outboxes DePaula. But DePaul's still a great attraction. So in January of that year, they announced in the paper they're going to make Frank DePaula and Bob Foster, even though he lost to Tiger, for the light heavyweight title in the Jersey City Armory. Willie Gilzenberg, who managed Tony Galento years ago, is the promoter. So Irving Mitchell Felt was the owner, the director of Madison Square Garden. He calls up Teddy Brenner. He says, Teddy, what am I reading this in Jersey City they're going to have Foster fight DePaula? He said, yeah, they are. He said, well, why aren't we making that match? He says, because it's a mismatch. He said, will it draw people? And Brenner said to him, quite prophetically, we'll draw 18,000 people, and Foster will knock him out in 1 round. So Irving Mitchell Felt stops for a second. He says, well, you know, Teddy, we're in business to make money. If it'll draw 18,000 people, make the match. So he makes the fight. It was January '69, or February, January '69. Foster fights him. He knocks out DePaul in 1 round. They drew 18,000 people. So Brenner was right. So the people didn't care, but he went 1, but they did 18,000 people. But yeah, the other great fights we had, the Tiger and Dick Tiger against Benvenuti was a terrific fight. Tiger beat him. Then his last fight was against Emil Griffith in the Garden. Griffith fought there many times. I remember we brought Jose Napoles to New York. He stopped Pete Toro. Well, I remember the night when Duran won the world lightweight championship with Buchanan. That was a great night. Wow. And before that, when Buchanan fought Laguna and Duran fought on the semifinal and scored a knockout in 62 seconds to establish himself, as the contender that everybody wanted to see. So yeah, there are pretty many, so many incredible nights that that's now almost 50 years over 50 years I've been at that new building. So yeah, and every great fighter, Ali, Frazier, Holmes, Foreman turned pro there, Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, as I said, Foster, Tiger, Duran, DeJesus, Buchanan, Azuma Nelson, Salvador Sanchez. Well, everybody, everybody was anybody probably fought there. The notable exceptions have been Mayweather, Tommy Hearns, and Michael Spinks. Yeah. But it's been quite a run. And again, it's like being from London, and we're fortunate that we've been a great boxing capital. We've had everybody come through here, like you guys have had there. We have a great a fan base and a knowledgeable fan base here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Have you done? If you don't mind me asking, I know you was there for the Ali fights and stuff like that. Who would you say is the best fighter, the best boxer, or the most talented you've seen up close? You've been ringside and you've fought. I'm sure you felt it many a time, but you fought.
Yeah. Wow.
Who would do, like, past or present, whoever? Like, do you know what I mean? Who's the one who you fought?
Oh, well, that's always, this seems a subject that comes up more often now, I guess, as you get older. The best heavyweight I ever saw was Muhammad Ali. I think the guy who fought, he beat Foley was the best. And next to him, it's really because you got Foreman, you got Frazier, you got Tyson, you got Holmes. They're close, but Ali for sure. The best light heavyweight. I work with Michael Spinks. I work for his promoter, Butch Lewis.
Yeah.
But Bob Foster he was a devastating punch. One punch he could destroy you.
Wow.
And you've got to remember, guys, like in Foster's time, he turned pro in 1959, and he didn't fight for the world title till 1968. That's 10 years. And after that, he still was able to hold the title longer than anybody up till that time and made 14, 15 defenses of the championship. The best middleweight ever was Carlos Monzon. We helped bring him there. And then probably Hagler next to him. It's Sugar Ray Leonard was the best welterweight. And, then you got Jose Napoles, the guy who I idolized.
Yes, yeah.
That was a guy, he turned pro in 58. It took him 11 years to get a title fight. What would have been if he would have won the title, 4 years after he turned pro? You can't imagine.
Wow.
As far as the lightweight, Duran for sure is the best lightweight. I think he was a better fighter than Mayweather's a great fighter, but I think Rivero Duran just was something amazing and fought for 30 years and fought the best fighters in the world. The featherweights, I saw Arguello, I saw Pedrosa, I saw Sanchez, and saw Nelson.
Yes.
Sanchez knocked out Nelson, but it was a fight that Azuma took on 3 weeks' notice.
Yeah.
For me, Azuma fought all the best fights on the most adverse conditions. He went to Australia, knocked out Jeff Fennick, a great figghter. He went there and fought Jim McDonald, stopped Jim McDonald in Britain. He went to California and fought, Marcos Villasana in front of a sold-out crowd of Mexican fans in the Olympic Auditorium. So he never did, and went to Puerto Rico to win the featherweight title, knocking out Wilfredo Gomez, a truly great fighter. So this guy's come through it to me, and he's managed to be a great gentleman, but a great, great fighter. Oliveras was the best bantamweight, and I saw him, and I saw Zarate, and, a number of them, but he was the best, really dynamic. And as the flyweights, I've seen a lot less. Probably Ricardo Lopez, the young fighter.
Yes.
He was a strawweight, but as a flyweight, and Miguel Canto. But there's so many, and those I think stand out. I have a 1 and 2, and those top two in each of those divisions probably are better than most of the others. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Well, Don, what were you like in New York when Mike Tyson were coming through? What were did everyone know that? Did you all think he were going to become what he became? Do you know the guys who actually worked on the inside like yourself? What were it like in that?
Yeah, my colleague Johnny Boz actually made almost all his matches. It's unfortunate. It's a funny thing. When Madison Square Garden, they started to change the way they promoted after the Brenner and Markson era ended. They had a few promoters in there, Gil Clancy and then John Condon, Harold Weston, but they weren't suited. They weren't promoters in mind. They just filled dates. And when there were 3 heavyweights that came along, one right after the other. You had Coney, Tyson, and Riddick Bowe. And they sort of carried that division. And the Madison Square Garden didn't sign any of them, and they were all New York guys. Tyson was with Jimmy Jacobs and Bill Caton. They did a great job. They built them up out of Albany, which is the capital of the state of New York. It's about 150, 180 miles north of the city. And he started drawing really, really good crowds. So he attracted attention. When he knocked out Marvis Frazier in one round, I think that was the fight that people really started to say, this guy's a phenomenon. And he recall he was just a baby. He was 18 years of age. And he was also trained by Customato, who was a legendary trainer, had Floyd Patterson, who at the time was the youngest man to win the heavyweight title, until Tyson came along and broke that record. So you could feel that. Unfortunately, he didn't fight his big fights in New York. He could have been here to New York what Joe Louis or Rocky Marciano was, coming up. But things had changed. Las Vegas had come in, so big fights went out to Vegas. They didn't stay here. I think that was unfortunate because I think a lot of those big fights could have been here, and they could have drawn, those kind of crowds in the baseball parks would have drawn 40, 50,000 people. I think the idea that he was a very great fighter, there was no question about it. He had a tremendous magnetism, a tremendous charisma, and great ability. One of the best. I mean, people we write him off because at the end he looked pretty poor, losing, to fighters that he never should have. But at his peak, he was as good as anybody. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I'm with you. Certainly, I think, like you say, the way, obviously, the lifestyle caught up with him. But even I think he beat some very good fighters even after the spell in prison. But I think that, like you said, I was a little bit too young, Don, to see it. But the sort of the atmosphere it created, the buzz around boxing, that so many people will tell you, like, they got involved in boxing because of Mike Tyson. I think some people will say some bad stuff as well, but he done a lot of good things for boxing and to bring new fans into the sport of boxing.
Absolutely. I'll tell you how popular. Guys are like, some guys are unique like that. Jack Dempsey was that way. But when Tyson made the comeback, and as we said, after he got for the first fight was Peter McNeely.
Yeah.
And he was undefeated, but we all knew that he couldn't fight. And it was the papers were devastated, horrible mismatch, this and that. Yet at the time, it was the biggest grossing fight of all time up to that moment. The pay-per-view surpassed everything. I mean, with inflation, obviously passed Ali Frazier, but
yeah,
the difference in time wasn't as many people, but more money. So it just showed that people just wanted to see Tyson. It was irrelevant who he fought. They just wanted to see Mike Tyson back in action, and they did. So, he was unique. He was very good for the game. Whatever happened, the rape charge, that was a terrible thing, but there's many opinions of that, what happened and why, foolishness more than anything else, I think. But having said that, he sort of fell apart, but he was a great fighter. People forget that after the comeback, he was able to knock out Bruno.
That's it, exactly
right,
that.
He won the title back, so it's not like he was a guy that didn't have the two controversial Holyfield fights, but he still was winning most, unless he fought the top guys. And I think after the loss to Lennox Lewis, that was it for him mentally.
Yeah.
I'd love to have seen that fight, wouldn't you, if it had been able to put together, but it were always all over a bit. If Tyson had fought Bo?
Oh, yeah, that would have been, that was a great New York fight, Bo and Tyson. I wanted them to open up just have a 3-round exhibition, open up Barclays Center, because they were both Brooklyn kids, one from Coney Island, one from Brownsville. But they never boxed. That would have been a very, very good fight. I think Mike at his peak was a little bit better. But, there's a great fight. Again, it's so much harder to make big fights today than it was 40, 50 years ago. Too many people get involved with the negotiations. You have, team sports where the team of this promoter won't fight the fighter from that team, where it was all wide open, where managers didn't have contracts with promoters then. They could go for the highest bidder. You had loyalty. There's no doubt about that. But you weren't tied up, so you couldn't take the best offer that you wanted.
What was it like, Don, when you got involved with Lennox Lewis on his march towards becoming world champion? What was that ride like?
Well, it was interesting. I got involved indirectly because Barry Hearn was promoting his first couple of fights. And he had a gentleman named Roger Levitt, who was a bit of a crazy guy. He passed away just this year. But we became good friends. Anyway, Roger had his agent, Frank Maloney, at the time, call me up, and we got talking. Frank was a boxing guy. And we got talking. He said, well, could you help with the opponents? Like Barry said to call you. So we worked with a few fighters, and then it came to the point where Barry wanted them to sign a promotional deal, and Levitt didn't want to do it. He thought he should get millions and millions. And he was thinking out there, but he thought outside the box because he wasn't in boxing. But some of the things he imagined came true. And so after that happened, Frank called me and said, look, I know you work with Barry. Would you be willing to work with us? So I called Barry. I said, it was only one fighter. It wasn't, working with a promoter, so to speak. And he said, look, Don, if you can make money with those crazy people, God bless you. Go ahead. I said, okay. And he gave me, it was okay then. Otherwise, I probably would not have done anything with them. And again, they had to only manage the fight. They weren't running a promotion competition to Barry. So I started working with them. And I saw Melvin Epps and Ocasio. And then when they came to America, they had the choice of going with Top Rank or main events. And they chose main events. And we worked together all the way from that time. Mike Weaver fights and all the way up to the title. And, of course, we always had Don King in the opposing corner, because he didn't have Lennox, and he did everything to put a roadblock in our way. And when Bo finally won the title, the notorious thing of throwing the belt in the basket, the wastebasket, rather than fight Lennox. Lennox ended up fighting Razor Ruddock, and retroactively they declared him champ, and then he went and defended against Tony Tucker, and just went on from there till he lost to McCall, regained the title, lost to, the story. The Rock went back. So we were there from about that point to the end, and it was a great experience.
Yeah. Right. Are you still in touch with him now, Don? Do you still catch up with him when you see him?
I see Lennox every now and then. He's pretty vocal. He does. I think he does broadcasting for PBC, if I'm not mistaken. So at their fights, I see him. Sort of you grow apart. They start to make. He's in the $100 million class, and I'm sitting here doing interviews about fights that happened 50 years ago. So no, but he's a real celebrity now. So yeah, but it's always cordial, never a problem. And once in a while, call Panos. I knew Roger Levitt. He just passed away. His wife told me that. And of course, we know what happened to Frank Maloney. We have not spoken in a while, not because of his choice of lifestyle, just that it just seems that, I know, people ask me about that. We're very friendly. And I said, it's sort of like Frank died and someone else took his place. The Frank Maloney, the literal Frank Maloney that I knew, doesn't exist. It's just an odd circumstance. But we haven't had a contact. Again, no animosity, just... It's such a different kind of thing to understand.
Well, you were involved with Carl Froch as well, weren't you, for a while? On his
yes, But Hennessy, now, he was a terrific fighter. Very underestimated. He didn't get in the Boxing Hall of Fame the first year around, and I thought he should have. There's a guy. He's not the most classically exciting fighter to watch. He's got a kind of a crazy style, sort of wears you out. I only knocked out Jermaine Taylor, but I was working with Mick Hennessy and we put him in with John Pascal, and he beat him. And then, of course, he knocked out Butte when he had signed with Eddie Hearn. But he's a guy that does, everything he does, he looks awkward, but he comes out and wins. Michael Spinks was a little like that. He was a kind of an odd style, but he just won, and
Found the way to win.
Yes, that's right. And he never turns down a fight. I knew when he was going to be a great fighter. Hennessy was having a show. We couldn't get an opponent. This guy fell out. That guy fell out. I said, I got a guy 6'2". Will you fight him? I'll fight him. This guy's a sub. I'll fight him. This guy's 5 foot. I'll fight him. He says, just get me. I'll fight anybody. I said, Mick, this is a great fighter. And he got some Polish kid, undefeated. And Carl, I think, outpointed him. But just the attitude, that I don't care who you get me. I'll fight anybody. And he did. When he went in that tournament, he ended up losing to Andre Ward, who's really a great fighter as well. But he was never, don't worry about fighting here. Don't worry about fighting there. And he went through the division. Really, as you say, he finds a way to win. And he's one of those kind of guys and very tough. Yeah.
What do you think the biggest differences? Two things, Don. What do you think? First question is, what do you think the biggest differences in the business side of the sport are now? And secondly, what do you think the biggest differences are in when you're trying to, like you're saying, Froch were a kid who would take anybody, whereas now it seems to be a lot of kids in the camps, and Anthony will attest to this, we speak about it all the time. They talk about who they don't want before who they do want.
No, that's right. Anthony Richard, that's one of the big changes. Well, the big change, the promotion, we always had fighters who'd sign promoters, but the promotional rights has completely changed the face of boxing. Russell Peltz and I is a veteran promoter now. I knew when he first started. We always talk about, I said, Don, today we used to promote for the public. Today we promote for ourselves, meaning that we create fighters and attractions to get them on a big TV contract here in America with HBO or Showtime. Well, HBO's out of boxing, but one of the big TV companies, or like there with Sky, or if you had the ITV. And you're not doing the whole idea used to be you entertain the fans. You entertain them with your 4-round bouts, with your 6-round bouts, with your main event. Entertain. Whether someone won or lost, it wasn't the end of the world. A fighter could lose, and you'd bring them back because you're running every week or every month. You bring them back on next month's show, like I explained about De Paula. He lost. The people didn't care. They still came out 18,000 to see him fight for the title. So he wasn't diminished. Today, a loss is so devastating to people. I always use an anecdote. Mike Jacobs was a great promoter. He started Joe Louis and Henry Armstrong in New York, and he ran the Garden for 20-odd years. And there was a fight in the Garden between Fritzy Zivic and Bummy Davis. And Zivic got injured. The date was about 1941, but the exact day, I think March. Let's say it was March 1st for the sake of discussion. And he called up Bojack's manager from Philadelphia, a man named Joe Granby. He said, I need you to do me a favor. He said, what is it? I need you to put Bob Montgomery managed. He was going to fight Bojack for the title. I need you to put Bob Montgomery in with Bummy Davis. He says, Mike, I can't do that. You know that in 3 weeks' time, the 21st of March, he's going to fight Bojack for the world title. And Jacob said, listen, Joe, I am the promoter of this fight on the 1st of March, and I am the promoter of the fight on the 21st of March. You fight Bummy Davis for me, you will fight in 3 weeks for the world title. He took the fight. Bummy Davis knocked him out in 1 round. They drew 17,000 people. 3 weeks later, Bob Montgomery fought Bojack for the title in the same Madison Square Garden. They drew 18,000 people, and Bob Montgomery won the title from Bojack. So it showed the fans didn't care. That was going to be a great fight with Davis, and it was going to be a great fight with Montgomery. They didn't care. Now, because of the commission, you couldn't fight 3 weeks later. But let's say it was 3 months later, you wouldn't have it either. So there was the big, big difference. Every fight had to be good. As long as it was an entertaining fight, it didn't matter if you were 22-0 or 32-0. But now the matchmaker says, my job is to get wins for the promoter's fighter. Well, that's what a manager used to do. I think the promoter and the manager have synthesized into one thing. And again, well, promoter used to be the guy who you ran a show in London. You ran a show in Manchester. Another promoter ran a show in Birmingham. So you had your territory. If it came to it where there's a big match between two guys, you might co-promote it. But now there's no set location. You can run anywhere. So the last thing you see sometimes that's announced is the location, where that was the exact opposite. Say the Olympic in LA used to run 3 fights a month. They wouldn't know who's fighting in July, but they would know they have July 11th, July 18th, July 25th. Now it's Smith versus Jones, TBA. They don't know where the site is. They make a fight and they dump it somewhere. So I think you've lost a lot of the crowd appeal. I think that's been bad. Indirectly, to me, casinos have been bad for boxing. Yes, it's helped cover the cost. Yes, it's helped, a lot of promoters save money. But you sacrifice the fan base, the local fan base, for a quick buck. I call them RF, room food and beverage promoters. I understand the necessity of it, but we stopped trying to build crowds, and we also stopped continuity. That's a bad thing as well.
Well, in terms of how often the kids box now, you mean, Don, as well?
In terms of fight, but you would bring fighters back. A fighter would make a hit in London, let's say. Well, you bring him back 2 months later, and then he would, would fight some other big fight there. Now we'll go off to America and take a fight that seems to be meaningless. You see bouts taking place in places that make no sense. Well, I'll give you a perfect example: the Joshua Ruiz rematch. Now that, for me as a fan, I have no interest in the bout, either fighter. That belonged in London. They would have drawn 50,000 people. But because of the recalcitrance of Ruiz, he didn't want to fight, so they had to take it to Saudi Arabia. I'm sure they made money there, like a Zaire fight. But I think it was a bit lost there in that kind of situation. We're taking fights. I mean, guys will put fights in. We're talking about now coming back to boxing. And they're going to run fights in, if not in television studios, then arenas with no one there. Well, I've seen that without the coronavirus, where we've had fights where 150 people show up. Yeah. Why is that? Then you must have a product that nobody wants to see. And we can't, I know you want to make the best fight. You can't, because a fighter will have a contract with a promoter, and the promoter will want so much money, it's not worth it to make the fight. And everyone is so devastated about losing today. That's not the end of the world if you lose a fight, or it used to not be. Now we put too much emphasis, I think, on winning or losing, but rather than making a good fight and pleasing and entertaining the public.
What changes would you make, Don, if you could? If somebody came to you now with a magic wand and said you can change a couple of things now to get it how you want it, what would you do?
Well, what I'd really like to see happen, I'd like the major arenas to go back to what they did. You asked me when I started, and like Madison Square Garden, they would run a fight every month. I mean, before that, my time, they would run every week. I would like to see if the 10 biggest arenas, let's say in the U.S., and maybe you could do it in Britain, would start their own boxing department. So Wembley Stadium hires Richard Poxon. And Manchester hires you, or the O2 Arena, and they run the boxing. And then 90% of these guys who are really managers would be what they are. They'd be managers supplying the fighters to the promoters. And you wouldn't need the promotional rights if you were running the shows. They would come to you. It then would be a buyer's market, and you could dictate, say, look, I don't care if this is a hard fight. I'll put you in January, but if you lose, I'm going to bring you back in 3 months. Don't worry about that. You won't get the same, but you'll get 50% or 60% what you got. So don't worry about losing. You're still going to come back and fight. Your career isn't over. And if we had 10 big arenas in America, in New York, in Chicago, Philadelphia, you could probably have the 2 in New York, Barclay, and they were running 10 shows a year just. That's 100 shows a year. That's 5 or 6 fights on the card. That's 600 fights a year. Everybody would be able to get work. You would bring fans back to going to shows. I mean, every other sport works that way. Every other sport's unique. You have a New York baseball team, a hockey team, a basketball team. You have one in Detroit. You have them in Chicago. But those players don't live there. They live all over the country. But people come, so they root for the New York team, or they root for Manchester United, or they root for, the team that plays in Birmingham, or they root for, Arsenal. And they identify with that team. They live in the area. Even if the players are living in Spain or in Switzerland, it doesn't matter. They identify with the team. But boxing, even more so, the fighters are actually coming from the area where they're fighting. Yeah. So you would have a fan base of averaging, let's say 10,000 people to every show. Not just
makes sense.
Right? And you didn't have to have a major championship fight. You just have good fights and people going. So that's what I think has hurt boxing. I would like to see more content of regular shows run, and the big arenas have the money to do it, and they have, and for them, it serves their purpose, because remember, you have an arena, and the job of an arena manager is to sell 365 dates a year. So is it too much to ask give up 10 dates a year for boxing? And that would give them an extra kind of entertainment to provide for the fans. It will work out for them. But as of now, they have not been inclined to do that. And I think that's a drawback. I think that's hurt. I think that would definitely help boxing to a great degree.
Okay. Makes sense.
Don, when you look at like the heavyweight picture now, from going back to when you went to Ali Frazier, how do you see the heavyweights now? How do you think that all squares up and stacks up?
Well, you got the three guys, I guess, over and above. Like you've got Wilder, you've got Fury, and you got Joshua. I think Joshua vindicated himself. Look, he didn't look sensational in winning that fight, but he fought to win it. I think the idea was just get the title back, and we'll deal with it after that. So the problem again is now I don't know when we're going to have Fury and Wilder back again, but it takes it takes 2 years to make these fights. I think it's unfortunate that we never were able to make Joshua and Wilder when they were both undefeated. I guess eventually they'll fight, but it's. I think they're really good talent. Those three really have talent. I think they're far outstanding above the next group of fighters who are around. But you've got a young bunch of fighters coming up today. There's a couple of guys. Herkovic is a good fighter. The two guys in Britain, Dubois is an excellent fighter.
Yeah.
So the kid he's about to fight, as you know, you've worked with them. So you got some good young. We need more fights like that. Where two undefeated guys fight before their world championship to establish themselves. The loser's not going away. He's not going to have to run and hide and give up his career. So that's the kind of fight you almost never see in the United States. The Dubois fight, and that's a fight that I'm sure it'll sell out the arena.
Yeah, it's got everyone talking, and because probably don't, because nobody knows who's going to win, and there's no
it's a good 50-50 fight in a lot of people's eyes.
It's great,
Like
George,
you said, the winner goes on then sort of to look towards moving towards the world title. The loser's not finished; he just has to rebuild slightly, and there's plenty of big fights there for him still, especially in the heavyweight division.
Absolutely. Now, George Parnassus said to me once, here's when you know you have a great fight. You got to have the public answer yes to one question and no to the other. You got to ask them, do you know who this fighter is? And they have to say yes. And I'm sure in Britain, everybody knows those two guys. And then you have to ask them who's going to win. They have to say no. Do you know who's going to win? And they say no. So the yes, we know them, but no, we know who's going to win. Then you got a terrific fight. And again, we have you almost never see fights like that in the United States. You used to see them when Frazier was coming up. He boxed Oscar Bonavena, who was a tough guy, got knocked down twice in the first round, came back to win a decision. You had fights where they proved themselves. Boone Kirkman and Foreman, he devastated Kirkman, who had lost only one fight. But when Ali came up, he fought Billy Daniels, an undefeated fighter. He went to Britain and fought Henry Cooper, if you recall. So you proved yourself as a fighter before you got to the championship. Now everybody's undefeated. You don't know if they can fight until they win a world title, and then sometimes you still don't know. And then when they lose, because he couldn't fight. I said, well, he could, but he only lost when he was world champ. So you do build records too much today, and we're not doing the kind of competitive fights that you used to have when a fighter wasn't a world champion. And again, it was not necessary to do that.
It was interesting last week, weren't it? Last couple of weeks, Don, we've spoke to Maurizio Sullivan, and then we had Levine. I know you were really close with Jose Sullivan.
Yeah, Mauricio as well is a wonderful person. He really has done a wonderful job inheriting the mantle for WBC.
Yeah. Well, we're talking just about how many titles there is now. When is it going to reach a saturation point when somebody says this is just too much? Do you know, from even 15 years ago to what it is now? How does it end up? How can you have so many silver, gold, emeritus, in recess, world champion, regular?
This is where you blame. Why do we have the question? Is why do we have all these world titles? So we need to tell it that to induce the public to come out. We don't have, like you say, neighborhood fights, so to speak. You have two guys from London, two guys from Manchester, two guys from York fighting each other would mean more than a world championship fight. And that's what we've gotten away from. Look, three of the biggest fights I was ever involved in terms of attendance. We had two kids in Montreal. One was Stefan Wallet, who was a Franco-Canadian, and the other was Davy Hilton, was one of the five Hilton brothers. He was an Anglo-Canadian, Quebecer, I guess. And they fought the first fight. They drew 19,000 people.
Yeah. And
Hilton knocked him out late in the fight. The rematch, Hilton beat him, 19,000 people. And the third fight, they drew 19,000 people. And that was the fight that Wallet won. So nobody was a world champion. Nobody had to be gold, silver, or bronze world title holder. It was just a solid fight. And that is the kind of fights that we're not doing anymore. It's as if the public is not sophisticated enough to say, it's just a good fight. You don't have to call it for a title. And again, the fact that we're not running regular shows on a regional basis, we've gotten away from it. We've lost a fan base where people say, This guy went to, I would go to New York, as I said, with DePaula was a perfect example. You follow his career. He said, well, I saw him fight in a small club. Now he's fighting the 6th round on a world title fight. Now he's going to fight the semifinal to a main event. Now he's fighting in the smaller club a main event. Now he's fighting the main event. Now he's fighting for the world title. But you'd follow that boxer's career. It's not now he's fighting here. Now he's fighting Chicago. Now he's going to fight in North Dakota. I can't follow it. But you could go to a fighter's entire career and he would fight around his area. It didn't mean he couldn't take a fight occasionally out of that area. But he would build a fan base. And we had fan bases in every major city for local fighters. And the big fights would always go to New York, let's say. And those fans would come in by the thousands. It's like a big fight would wind up in London, but you would empty Manchester or Birmingham for them to go and follow them. And we have lost that. That is a very bad thing for boxing. We've definitely lost. You only get a competitive fight when it's for the world title.
Especially with this whole virus situation, what is it going to do to grassroots boxing? Are the kids on the non-TV shows, do you know, like what we call, you probably call them club fights or club
fight? Yes. Well, there's the thing, you know, it's embarrassing. There, here, what are we doing? We've got a situation where the guys can say, we'll run in the studio. Okay, because we got 500,000 from TV, 100,000 from TV, we can do it. But what if you haven't got television? All you do is have the game. And you know, even with that, you lose money on these club shows. So now you're going to say, I can't make no money. I have no attendance. I have nothing. There's nothing I can do. I can just invest money in this show. Well, what are you doing it for then? You know, then it's really difficult. Then nobody will want to lose because, well, look, I can't get paid much. I really got to fight a terrible opponent. And it's going to go against you. You can't run those shows. You're just not doing it. So there'll be less work for the fighters, which is going to be really hard when we think about it. I don't want to get too pessimistic, but it's going to take a long time to crawl out of this. It's going to really be tough for us.
They're the same, without a doubt. Without a doubt. We're going to lose. I think we're going to lose a lot of promising fighters as well. We've said that as well, without a doubt.
I think we were saying last week, Don, how the market is at the moment, promoters can give big guarantees off the gate and big guarantees off the pay-per-view, but because of the economic situation and the virus situation that's preceding that, I just don't see those big guarantees being able to be there, do you?
No, well, look, it's sort of like if you go back to the stock market crash of 29, we had the depression in the 30s. If you look in the 1920s, when we really had an economic high where, you know, Jack Dempsey, I think he got $750,000 for the first Tunney fight, and Tunney got $1 million for the rematch. Well, the market dropped, and fighters went from fighting, you know, on that top level. I mean, it dropped a bit. They went to fight, you know, they got $100,000. So fighters who were making $10,000 in the 1920s for 10-round fights were then making, you know, $1,200 in the 1930s. You could see that precipitous drop. So we live with it. Now, if the cost of living goes down with income, I guess we'll have to survive it. A guy's willing to do it. That's another big question. You know, are you willing to fight for whatever is there? I know you guys would know that as well as I do. I don't know if they're willing to do it.
I think so. I think some kids won't, and don't you? I think
no, without a doubt, some kids are going to think, you know, I can earn that money without getting punched in the face. So I'm gonna do another job.
Right. Well, as I said before, when I was making the discussion about American baseball, so they said the owners will do it. Their 40% of their money comes from the gate and the concessions and the parking at these big stadia. So if the players want to come back, so they'll play for 50% of what they're getting. So a player's signed for $10 million a year. Will he play for $5 million? Now they were quoting the players' union said we won't do it. Well, then you don't play baseball. Would you rather play baseball for half your salary or not? I mean, that goes to anybody. If you say, well, waiters, but you're going to have half the money. You want half the money or none of the money? You want 70% or none? This is going to be the big question. Are you willing to take? Oh, we're all going to take less. We know what we've been making through this drought with the virus. Yeah. Nothing. So anything is more than this is okay. I'm not taking
a little bit of something's better than a lot of nothing.
Yeah, but I think kids who've earned good money over the last few years or last couple of years, really, really big money or good money, you're going to take 60% less. And they've made good money now. I think a lot of them might just think, well, I'll just wrap it up. Then I'm not doing that.
They'll wrap it up and say, look, I've got those kind of guys probably have millions. They say, I'll ride out the storm. It's going to take 2 years. We'll come back in 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, I mean, boxing survived the Depression. There was a lot of boxing in the Depression because people needed money. You know, so they were willing to fight for whatever was there. I mean, the purses, as they say, they went down sometimes by 70%. If you look at Madison Square Garden, where they were $20 ringside, they were then charging $4 or $5 for ringside seats. And then, of course, the economy came back after the war. But you can see a precipitous drop in what they charged from the 1920s through the 1930s. So something like this is, and I don't think we're going to last 7 or 8 years with this. It's going to be a year or so to come out of it. But initially, will people be willing to take less? I mean, as I said, we're all taking less. I mean, none of us are making any money through this whole thing. So we're there. We're ready to make. Are we willing to say, all right, can I make 50% what you made the last year? I will. That's better than nothing. But right now I'm on 0%. So, 50% of last year is a lot better than what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah. So on a positive note, Don,
sir.
When things do start kicking on and getting big again, what are the big fights you're looking forward to? Which are the fighters today that you really like to see?
Wow. I guess let me ask you guys, because you've, you're more aware of what's, I mean, of course, the Joshua fight, the rematch, hopefully Fury against Joshua's got to be the fight. Do you think that'll ever be made from your perspective? You guys live there, you know the players, you know.
I really hope it does, and you think there's that much money involved, then surely it does, but I just don't think it's going to be that straightforward. I think a lot of politics are involved, and it looks like Fury and Wilder happen again, doesn't it? I mean, not people are too keen on seeing the third fight.
No.
But, if it does, then again, obviously Joshua's got to stay. Both guys have got to stay. Got to keep winning, but I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as seeing it as what you'd like to think.
Yeah, that's the problem.
It's back to kind of what you said, Don, that it's no longer about the manager and boxer anymore.
Yeah.
You've kind of got to get Eddie Hearn, Bob Arum.
Yeah.
Premier
involved. Yeah.
Got to get everybody around the table, all different networks, to try and agree something. And it's money, it's ego, it's just, it couldn't be any more difficult, could it? I mean, look, naturally, Don, that's a fight that should happen straight away, isn't it? Really now.
If you want a Christmas gift for boxing in Britain and the world, what could be better than that is the one fight where people say, you know what? Yeah. I know that coronavirus is bad. Put on my mask and I'll go to the stadium, and 60,000 could turn out for that. That would be the best shot in the arm we could ask for boxing in the world. Yeah, we're back. If you want to come back with an exclamation point, that would bring it back. And
we don't love it to happen, but it's the same as when it were Wilder and Joshua. Why did that not happen?
Yeah.
Why could it not get made?
Right. But I mean, this is a fight with two Brits. This is a fight that, I mean, it's even more likely. I mean, this is what happens involved with Lewis and Holyfield. It took a long time to do that because on one end you had Showtime, and on the other end you had HBO, and on one end you had Main Events, and the other end you had Don King. And it finally happened. But as I was telling you before, how quickly Ali and Frazier came about.
Yes, I mean, 90 days.
90 days. And the both of them, yes. And they fought Quarry, Bonavena, and Frazier fought Foster from October into March. So they had to do it. The public demanded it so much. There was nothing else you could do. And they did. Ali goes, I want 10 million more. Now, the rematch was problematic because, as I said, when they thought they should have made more money, they couldn't get it together. But the first fight, it happened, and the public demanded it, and it did. I don't know how much influence the public has now to say, we got to have Fury Joshua. But, boy, that would be the greatest thing that could happen to boxing in the world right now.
You think the public can influence it? I don't so much, do you?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. How much do they answer to the public? Again, when you have people, they were just promoting in Britain, a lot more. But now this guy's going to fight in Vegas or here. But boy, if they feel they owe anything to the industry, these promoters got to get to make that fight. That 100% is the fight. That really, in so many ways, so symbolically and financially, in terms of the sport, in terms of everything, that's the to make to bring us out of the doldrums. There's nothing you could ask for better than that.
But what if they take it to Saudi Arabia like Eddie?
That to me would be criminal. That's terrible. It belongs in Britain,
It's got to happen either in Old Trafford or at Wembley. The two big stadiums. In my opinion, it can't go anywhere else. But Rich just said it then. If there's a lot of money on the table in other places, but it'd be criminal for it to go outside of the UK.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything, if Boris Johnson has any, Queen Elizabeth, I mean, that is honestly, that can bring back not just boxing, but the country. This is the biggest event they can put together. Sports as big as a World Cup final, and you have to play your way in. This can be made. This is just a matter of negotiating, the money. A World Cup, you go through 16 or 36 teams. You don't know who's going to win. But this is there. The two fighters are from there. The two fighters have titles. The two fighters, that can be made. And it's a shame on us in the industry if that fight's not made.
Yeah.
Whether I'll probably have a $35 ticket, but I'll tell you, I'd like to be at the fight.
Me and Anthony will buy it. Don't worry, we'll club in. We'll club in.
That's what they'll be charging for the for the hamburgers that night. Yeah.
Yeah. What about Alvarez, Don? How much do you like Canelo?
Yeah, look, he's a terrific talent, magnificent. I hope they do the third Golovkin fight. I know they're talking about it. That would be a fight that everybody wants to see. I believe that would be really an exciting match to make for him. So Canelo, and he can really, stimulate the fan base.
Yeah, he's massive now. And there's obviously been a lot of talk about in boxing, Billy Joe Saunders, but obviously now nobody knows kind of where that stands, and it's all.
Yeah. We're sort of up in the air again. We've got to wait. I know. I would think the fall before we really start to get any kind of fights that would bring crowds. But I am told that Nicaragua is running boxing, so we can all run down there and try to make a living for a while.
Well, if you've been to Zaire,
that's it. Yes. And they still have $35 tickets for fights in Nicaragua, so you can all afford to sit ringside.
Right, Don. Well, thanks ever so much for taking an hour out and having a catch up with us. It's really appreciated.
Thanks so much, Don.
Thank you. Take care. God bless. Thanks for the time and listening to my long, boring story.
No. Thank you, Don.
All right. God bless you. Thank you anytime.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.